Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. Today's video is another video in our series of Global War 1936 to 1945 nations. And today's nation that we're going to cover is actually three nations, but it goes by the term Commonwealth, or the Commonwealth, formerly known as the Commonwealth of Nations. Now, let me just tell you first what the Commonwealth was. So there was the British Empire, and the British Empire it colonized much of the world. That's why English is such a common language in the world. And you look in, it's probably the most widely recognizable international language. They colonized a lot of different places, so they started there, right? And they colonized North America. Even though America is not part of the Commonwealth, the United States there, they were colonized by England. They colonized much of Africa down here, like you see the brown parts, right? And the Middle East and India and Hong Kong and islands down here. And of course there's Australia and New Zealand, and there's British Islands out here, and Canada and the United States out there. So they got around, right? And this was back in the days of the big tall wooden ships. And the Royal Navy was Britain's Navy, and they were the best Navy. By far they were the best. And so they were the ones that colonized the most. Other European states did as well, of course, like Spain. They colonized much of South and Central America. France colonized all over the world like England did. Portugal were spice traders, and they made it all the way to Japan. They were the ones that's why there's hot peppers all over the world, was because of I just got to get something off the board there. It was because of the Portuguese. It was an age of colonization that lasted hundreds of years. But anyway, Great Britain was the largest of those empires, and so. Those as the modern day came around, like the 1900s rolled around, all the nations of the Commonwealth were starting to become, or most of them anyway, were starting to become more and more independent. You know, running themselves. Taking care of their own affairs, even though they were still associated to England. They were basically doing their own thing, and so like they were referred to at the time as dominions of the British Empire. And then in the mid 1920s, they got together and they had a conference, and they all decided, okay, England and all of her dominions were going to be equal. Basically, you couldn't put one above the other. In other words, England was not going to rule the rest of them. And then in 1931, they formalized that. They formed the Commonwealth of Nations, and it basically stated that they were independent nations, but that they were they still had allegiance to the Crown of England. So in today's times, that would be Queen Elizabeth, right? So Queen Elizabeth II is the head of state. It's the only head of state that I've ever known in Canada, because she's been the queen longer than I've been alive, right? You know, it's the head of state of Australia and many places around the world, particularly England, right? But and then after the Second World War, the nation started going their own way more and more. Like we're much more of an independent country now in Canada than we were at the time that the Second World War broke out. Well, when we went to war, it was basically to defend the crown of England, which was our crown as well, right? That's why the United States didn't get in there right away, because they weren't part of that Commonwealth. You know, they didn't have that obligation, let's just say, to defend that crown, because it wasn't their queen anymore, right? Or king, as it might have been the case. But anyway, that's what the Commonwealth was, and it still exists, but it's really just, you know, a League of Nations kind of thing, you know, like a specialized kind of League of Nations. I'm not going to get into absolutely what it is, because I honestly don't really know that much. I know they have the Commonwealth Games still, so it's like an Olympic type event, and you know the Commonwealth still exists, but that's what it was right up until then. And so we're going to go through the Commonwealth nations in the game here. There is Great Britain, and there's the FEC, or Far East Command, and then there's ANZAC over here, which was the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. That's what ANZAC stands for. But we're going to start out with Great Britain, okay? So let's just take a look at that old national reference sheet here for Great Britain. So you can see in 1936, they start with 11 IPPs, but their wartime income, that's the total value of all their land zones, that totals 25. So when you look at here, this is the Great Britain roundel right here. And you'll see them, they're down in Africa, you know. You'll find them even in the South Pacific over there. But also they include, like here's their roundel here, but they also include the Canadian roundel as well. And there's Western Canada over on the other side over there as well. So that's all part of Great Britain. But the home country, let me just set this down. So this is the home country here, and it consists of London, which is down here, and Northern England, and Scotland, and the British Midlands. Oh, here's Northern England. This is Scotland. This is the British Midlands, and this is Northern Ireland right here, just a small one. It doesn't include Ireland. Ireland would be a minor power on its own for the purposes of this game, and also Canada has kind of a special status in the game. Like they do give them their own roundels, plus that they have the ability to have major and medium factories in there, and that's the only place on the board where you're going to find that a nation can have those kind of factories outside of its home territory. I believe why they did that was because of Canada's contribution to the Second World War. It was, even though we were a small country back then, I'm Canadian myself if you didn't know, but even though we were a small country in terms of population, like very small, we had a huge contribution to the Allied war effort, particularly in supplying the island over here of Great Britain with supplies. Like they would have starved out, right? Kind of like surrounding a castle and starving them to death, right? But we had a huge part in defending the convoys and sending the supplies over, and plus soldiers. We absolutely did send soldiers in both world wars, and they all fought with distinction. It's a source of great pride in our country that our contribution to both of those world wars was as significant as it was. It's not lost on any of us. So anyway, that's why they have their own there. And one of the things that you can do is that you can receive Lend-Lease from the United States into this factory over here. That's one of the things that Great Britain can do. Not all of the Commonwealth, just Great Britain, right? So normally you'd have to move the supplies across the water here, and then a U-boat, German U-boat, could interdict those supplies, or I guess I suppose an Italian sub could too, right? But because you can just send it directly to this factory here, the money, there's no way to interdict that, right? So that's one of the advantages that Great Britain has in this game. And you'll see, like some of the units and everything, specialized units that other people have. Great Britain doesn't have those, but it does have other advantages, including having 3 separate economies. But that's one of them, is that Lend-Lease path there. In the 1939 scenario, the British Commonwealth is at peace with all of the nations, so that there's no state of war that exists for them. In the 1939 scenario, they are at war with Germany, and Poland, who is this green country over here. Poland aligns with Great Britain at the start of the British turn, but you'll probably find in most games that most if not all of this country will be wiped out by the time the British turn comes around. The Germans go before them, and then the Russians go, and you'd be lucky to find any any Polish troops left, right? So as far as Lend-Lease goes, You can't lend lease to the FEC or to ANZAC, okay? Your Commonwealth partners. You can lend lease to any other nation on the board that you want, but Great Britain has to be at war first. It doesn't say anything about the war status of the other nations, but Britain itself has to be at war in order for you to send lend lease. And then as far as surrender goes, if London falls, you can actually move your capital. You have a few different choices. So there's Ottawa over here, and then there's Sydney down in Australia down there, and there's Calcutta, and there's the South African Union down at the very bottom down there. So there's 5 possible places that you can have a capital, and then once all those places are taken out, though, then you have no more choices, right? And then so you would surrender. But you do get the chance to come back, though. Sorry, I was just reading that. So like somebody takes your capital out, somebody takes your very last capital out, then you still have the opportunity to when the Great Britain turn comes around again, to take that capital back. And if you can't take it back by the end of your turn, then you surrender. And that's like all the nations now. That holds true. France is a little different story, because once Paris is taken out, then you take everything off the board. But other than that, everybody has that second chance of coming back. So that's that. Let's get to declarations of war now. Now, as far as who Great Britain can declare war on, first of all, one thing that you need to understand is that when Great Britain declares war, then the FEC that you're looking at on your screen there, and ANZAC over here, they also follow Great Britain into war. These nations down here cannot declare war on anybody. Only Great Britain can declare war on them. And these nations, whatever Britain decides, these nations follow for the purposes of this game, okay? So, who can they declare war on? They can declare war on a minor nation. So any of the neutrals that we talk about, right? Like here, this is Iran, right? If they declare war on Iran, they wouldn't need to declare war on all 3 territories. They would just declare war on Iran. You know, there's 3 territories there. But Iraq, that's just 1 territory. But still, it would be the same declaration of war. To declare war on Iran is one thing. To declare war on Iraq is one thing, right? But even though you can do that, and you can do that on the very first turn of the game if you want, there's a 10 IPP penalty for doing that. And that cost can be shared amongst the other nations that are eventually going to be allies in this game. So France, the United States, and all of the Commonwealth nations could share in that cost of that 10 IPPs. And if that's all there was, then, you know, there might be a reason to attack Iran. You know, there's something to take, right? There's actually some bonuses in there and things. But the problem is that when Great Britain attacks a minor power like that, then the United States also suffers a -8 penalty on their peacetime income. And that's a really, really big deal. Like that's a really solid roll, right? Might even be 2 rolls. And turns we're talking about when we're talking about rolls here. And you need to get the Americans in the war as quickly as possible. You're delaying the Americans getting into the war if you were to attack a minor power like that. So it's not likely that you will see anybody from the Commonwealth attack a minor power. But you could, though. As far as the Axis, you can declare war on Germany, Italy, and Japan, but only once Britain reaches its wartime income of 25, and that nation has declared war on another nation during the game. So we know that to be true. If you played version 2, that was the rule that you thought of with Italy there, right? But it's actually the same rule with Japan and China. If Japan never attacks anybody, you can't attack them. And the same holds for Germany, but we know that's not going to happen, right? I mean, they're big and they're belligerent, they're powerful, they're going to go out and they're going to be attacking people before you do. That's pretty much a given, right? So, it still holds true though, and that you can't attack one of those Axis powers until they've attacked somebody else. And it doesn't matter if it's a minor power or if it's a major power. As long as they've attacked somebody, then you can attack them. And as far as the Russians go, this is a little bit more complicated. Now, you can declare war on them, but only under the certain circumstances. Like one is the same as the version 2 rule, where Berlin or Tokyo has fallen. Then you're free to declare war on them. But that hardly ever happens, right? But now there's 3 more ways you could do it. So if the USSR currently possesses an original Allied land zone. Now, how that might happen here, let's just take a look. Let's pick this one here, Eastern Egypt right here. Let's say Italy takes Eastern Egypt from Great Britain. And then Russia comes down and takes Eastern Egypt from Italy. Well, now Great Britain is in possession of a British territory without ever having attacked Britain, right? So now Russia has a choice. They can either say, wasn't that nice of us, you can have your territory back, and they can leave, or they can just say, you know what, we're going to keep this territory, we're going to collect the money for it. If they decide to keep the territory and collect the money for it, or even like if it's not worth money, I mean this one just happens to be, but if they decide to keep a land zone that Great Britain owns, then they're fair game. The Commonwealth and the other allied nations, for that matter, can declare war on the Russians. But the Russians, like they don't have to do it right away. Like, I mean, if this happened in, say, 1939 or something, then they might think, okay, it's not in our best interest to go to war with Russia, but we'll file that for later, right? And so later on comes along and say it's 1944, and now is maybe a good time to attack Russia. You think, okay, Russia's still in possession of this land zone. Now we're going to declare war on them. But Russia can avoid that. Like if they see you talking in the corner with your partner over there and they're pointing at you and laughing, then they're probably getting an idea that, oh, they're about to declare war on me. And the Russian player can say, you know what, I'm going to be a nice guy and I'm going to give you this land zone back, in Eastern Egypt. Well, now you can't declare war on them anymore. Like you should have done it before that, right? So that's one way. If they own one of your land zones and they refuse to give it back. Another one is, and this one's probably more likely, and that is, let's take a look at Iran here. Because this is probably the easiest example. If USSR has declared war on a neutral minor power not adjacent to a Soviet home country. So actually, let's talk about Iraq then. So they could take this territory, they could take this territory. But if they decide to take this nation here, well, that nation is not bordering the Soviet Union, is it? It's not touching the Soviet Union. So again, the Allies don't have to declare war on them right now because they did that. They can file that for later, and that's not something that the Russians can give back. Once they've attacked that nation, I mean, that lasts for the rest of the game. Even if somebody else was to come along and take it from them, it doesn't matter. Like say the Italians come in there and take it off them, that doesn't matter. Russia still attacked declared war on a nation that wasn't bordering them, and it doesn't matter which one it is. It could be that one. It could be the Belgian Congo down here, right? It could be Portugal over here. It could be one of these nations down here. Any time that they've attacked a nation that is not bordering their own home country of Russia, they've opened themselves up to a declaration of war by the Allies. And then the only thing that the Commonwealth can't declare war on is the other Allied nations, right? Like that includes the United States, and that includes France over there, and of course the KMT as well. They wouldn't be declaring war on the KMT. So that's who they can declare war on. So as previously mentioned, Great Britain can go to war once they reach their wartime income of 25. They have the ability to declare war. So how do they get there? One way is by somebody declaring war on them. So like it could happen at any time. If it happened in 1937 and they were only at 12 IPP, say Germany attacked them, boom, they're all the way up to 25 IPP. If somebody declares war on them, that's what happens. They immediately go to full income. Now, if that doesn't happen, then then there's other ways. Okay, so starting in July of 1939, the British get 1d12. So they roll that 12-sided dice, and whatever that number is on there, they add that to their income. So it could be a 1, could be a 12, could be anything in between, right? And also, there's a lot of other things. It's really up to mostly Germany or Italy's belligerents that brings them up to wartime income. There's a little bit that Japan could do that alarms them as well. As far as the other partners, the other Commonwealth partners, they're more alarmed by Japan because that's where they are. But we'll see their peacetime bonus increases after we go through the Great Britain ones. So another one is Germany or Italy declares war on the USSR. Again, you get to roll 1d12 and you add whatever's on that dice. So Germany or Italy declares war on any neutral nation in Europe. So, like it could be Denmark, right? It could be Poland. It could be anybody. Not anybody. There's a few places that they are allowed to annex, and we'll get to those in just a couple of seconds here. So if that happens, then the British get 2d12. So they get to roll 2 12-sided dice and add that to their income. The Axis or Comintern declares war on France. Britain moves to wartime income. I mentioned that already. Germany completes a capital ship. So that's either a battleship or a fleet carrier, right? And the British would get just $1 or 1 point. You would call it, I guess, one industrial production point. Japan declares war on a neutral, and that includes China as well. Like they'll probably go to war with China. Includes the Netherlands, Mongolia. There's a few neutrals over on that side of the board there, right? So $2 each time that happens. And then the last one is Germany annexes Austria, Bohemia, and Slovakia. Now that'll probably happen the first 3 turns of the game. Let me just bring this over here. Germany, they're allowed to annex these 3 territories right here. This one, and this one. And all they do is they walk in there and they get them for free, right? But they can only do them one at a time. And so they're going to do that the first 3 turns of the game. And so that's not the same as declaring war on a neutral nation. They're allowed to go and do that, but the British are going to get +1 each time. Not +1 d12, but just +1 for that, okay? And as far as their wartime bonus income, let's go around to the other side of the board there. Because there are a few bonuses they can get. And this is, once they're up past or up to that 25 IPP income, and they are at war with another major power, okay? So the possession of the Suez Canal in eastern Egypt. So if they own this land territory right here, that's +3 bonus for them. Like say their income is at 25, so you would add 3 onto that, so that's 28. Iran is neutral or possessed by Great Britain. That's +2. And I showed you where Iran was there. It's that green country there. So if they possess that green country, or that green country is still neutral like it is right now, +2. There are no enemy submarines on any British Commonwealth convoy line. So let's take a look at the convoy lines here. Like you look down there, this is an FEC convoy line. They're part of the Commonwealth, right? And then down here, that's a British convoy line. Over here, that's a British convoy line. And that one there, and there's one up there. There's one over there in the Mediterranean. This one over here that splits off, it's got the Anzac symbol on it. That's a British Commonwealth line. So as long as there are no enemy submarines on those convoy lines, then the British are going to get +2. There is one more thing that's worth mentioning though, something that I was mistaken about, and I made this video yesterday, and I was corrected today, and I was glad that I was, because I didn't quite understand something that was really important. I thought that as soon as the Germans or the Italians attacked France, that meant that Great Britain was automatically at war with them. And that's not the case. As I showed you there, what happens is they go to full wartime income. Now, that doesn't mean they're at a state of war. Now, if on the same turn, like when Germany was doing their attack moves, they attacked and took out Paris and everything, but they also were out here in the Atlantic, and they were convoying the British lines or something, then that's a declaration of war on Britain, right? And so Britain would go up to their full wartime income, and on the other two nations, their incomes would top up as well. I'm talking about the FEC and Anzac. Their incomes would both top up because Great Britain was at war. But if Germany doesn't declare war on Britain, if they only declare war on France, then Britain is still not at a state of war. I didn't realize that. I thought they were automatically at war when France was. But that's really important, because if Britain declares war on Germany after that, like let's say Germany does not attack Britain, and Britain, though, they want their income for the FEC and for Anzac to go up, because they don't automatically go up if France gets attacked, right? So they could do that just by declaring war on Germany, and then the incomes of those two places would go up. But what doesn't happen then is that they don't get a +5 bonus for the Americans for the Germans declaring war on the British, right? Because there is a thing for the Americans to get +5. So if Germany wants to try to squeeze that +5 out, that's one thing they could do, and that's going to set the Americans back another turn, right? I mean, a 5 is a fairly low roll, but it's still, it all counts, right? And so it could be a whole turn that they're setting the Americans back by forcing the British to declare war on them. And like they'd like to be at war with them when that happens, because these guys' income is probably going to double, and the same with these guys' income. So you're going to look at that if you're the German player, like how are you in position to convoy more than all that's worth, right? Then who cares about the 5 American IPP, right? And then also with these guys, right? Are they a threat somehow? You're just going to have to look at the game and as the German player and as the British player, and decide whether or not those declarations of war against each other are worth it in that game, right? So that's something worth mentioning. And I'm going to get to the other peacetime bonus increases in a moment. All right, so let's get to the the other members of the Commonwealth here. There's something that I'd like to show you here on the two charts here. You see the Far East Command there, it says wartime income, total value of land zones. And then on Anzac, it just says total value of land zones. That's what the FEC should say, because they don't have a wartime income. Neither one of them have wartime income, because neither one of them have the ability to declare war. That's just their full income. If you added up all their land zones, and they would go to full income if the British go to war. So I just wanted to show you that that's a change that's going to be made on the national reference sheets. So as far as here, let me just get to it here. As far as the peacetime increases, now how to increase on the Far East from, like if you start in 1936, you start at 5 IPPs, and the 14 is the maximum. So how to increase that would be, starting in 1939, you would roll a D6, not a D12, but a D6, because it's a smaller income, right? You're just going to roll D6, and you do that once per turn, and whatever numbers on the die there, that's what you would add to your income. Also, if Japan declares war on any nation, so when they declare war on China, that's +2. They declare war on Netherlands, that's +2. They declare war on Mongolia, that's +2, right? Anytime they declare war on somebody, it's +2. And also Japan completes a capital ship. So if they put a carrier or a battleship on the board, then that's +1 each time that they do that. Okay, that doesn't include the ones that are already there. Like those ones are already on the board, right? Now, as far as Anzac goes, the way that they can get up, like they start at 3, and then the total value of their land zones is 7. So their increases are Axis or Comintern declares war on the Netherlands East Indies. Now they really care about that because that's kind of their shield right here, right? This is Anzac down here, and this is the Netherlands East Indies here. And so if Japan were to declare war on that, or any Axis or Comintern, like the Russians even, that's +3. They're going to go up. So basically they'd be doubling their income if that happens. And then the other one is if Japan declares war on China or any other neutral nation, kind of like with FEC there, then there's +2 on that. As far as wartime bonuses for them, for both of them, so once Anzac has reached that threshold of 7, then they can get +2 per turn if, here, let me just move this back so we can see this, if there are no enemy surface warships within 2 zones of Australia. So this is Australia here, obviously not down here because that's only 1 zone away, right? So that's 2 zones away, that's 2 zones away, that's 2 zones away, this is 2 zones, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So as long as there are no enemy surface ships, we're not talking about subs here, we're not talking about transports because they're not warships, right? We're just talking about enemy surface warships. If there's any of them in any of those spaces there, they don't get a bonus. If there's none of them there, then they get that +2 bonus. And that's once they're up to 7. And FEC also has a wartime bonus as well. And let me just turn the camera here. So this territory here, Aden, pretty strategic place. It's got a major naval port there, and where the Suez Canal there, Eastern Egypt. So if Britain is in control of these 2 right here, then the FEC will get +2. So I mean, the reason for that is obvious. Like that's kind of the route between the colony here of FEC, and that's the route that they would take up to their home country, right? So basically what it is keeping that open, and for that they're going to get a +2. And there's not much, like we've been through a lot of the nations so far, and there hasn't been, there's been some of them have a lot of special abilities. Great Britain doesn't really have any. They have one that is called Dutch colonies. Let me just show you what that is. Okay, so you see those orange guys up there, right? That's the capital of the Netherlands. There's a couple boats in there, and there's a few dudes in there. And over here, I don't have a roundel on it, but there's Suriname. That's a Dutch colony there. That's worth 1 IPP. I think the Netherlands up there is worth 2. And then there's all these islands down here. This is the Dutch East Indies. And I've got roundels on all of these ones. And what happens is that they're going to align to Britain when Britain goes to war, right? And but if the Axis or Comintern declares war on the Netherlands, so Netherlands becomes controlled or aligned to Great Britain at the end of the combat phase. Great Britain receives income from Dutch land zones once Great Britain is at war. It may distribute this income as it sees fit to itself, FEC or Anzac. So let me just tell you what that means. Some people, they were kind of thinking, I know I've seen a debate online there, where they thought, okay, well, they've attacked these boats here, so that means everything turns British. So, and then, you know, like they were going to plan on attacking all those islands at once, but as soon as they attack the first one, then the rest are British. That's not the case. First of all, Great Britain would have to be at war with a major power, right? So if that happens in the first few turns of the game, like it did with my Dutch Pannenkoek strategy that I showed on a video not long ago, then they only control these nations. They don't align to them, and they don't replace their units with their own. But let's just say that Britain was at war, and so they do have the ability to align them. Now, you can't align them until the end of the combat phase. So Japan gets to come down, they get to do all their combat moves and everything, their declaration of war. Then they get to conduct combat, and if they win the territories, then they put the roundels on and everything. You know, they might win some, they might lose some, they might win them all, they might lose them all. We don't know, right? Whatever happens though, at the end of the combat phase, that's when the Netherlands is going to align to the British. So like this one might be left here, you would put a British roundel on here. Maybe they didn't get this one, you would put a British roundel on here, right? If there were any units left, then you would replace them with British units. And over here, you put a British roundel on that one over there. And up there in the capital, if that one had not been attacked, then that one as well would get a British roundel on it. And those units would become British units. And what you would do is you would collect the money. Let's say you were left with 5 IPP income after they've been ravaged by the Axis. Okay, what I do, like I have these coasters from HBG, so I'll have them for all the nations and everything. I'll put that 5 IPP on here, and then when it comes time for the British to go, they'll just see who needs the money, right? Like I'll have three separate ones, 3 separate coasters, one for Great Britain, one for FEC, and one for Anzac. And I'll see, okay, well, you know, Great Britain could they could buy this or that. You know what? If I had an extra $1, then I could buy a tank. So I'll take $1 from there, buy that tank. These guys, they need an extra 2 to buy a sub. Okay, I'll take 2 and put it here. That leaves 2 for these guys, right? So, you know, that's just the way I divvy it up like that. I see who needs it. I don't necessarily give it to, you know, like I could give it all to one of them. I could give, I could split it up evenly. You just do what you feel like doing. That money is yours to split up between the different powers. And the other one they call a special ability, but it isn't really a special ability, is the fact that Great Britain is an island nation over here. So we talked about this in the Japan video. Now, if you were to blockade all of the ports in here, in other words, you would have to have 3 surface warships in this zone, in this zone, in this zone, in this zone, and in this zone here. So 5 different zones. That would be 15, a minimum of 15 surface warships. You could blockade the Great Britain there, and then they would only get 3, 6, 9, 10. This one's not worth any. So their income would only be 10 if you could do that. I don't see that happening to them. In Japan, like there's only 2 land zones or 2 sea zones, so that would be a lot easier. But this one with 5 sea zones and needing 5 ships, probably not going to happen, but you could do it. So if you did do that, if you did blockade all of those sea zones there and all of these ports, then Britain only receives the income that is left over, that's inside the island here. But the other thing is, though, that if that happens, then they don't have the ability to be convoyed, right? Like Germany couldn't convoy any of their convoy lines anywhere, because none of those lines are the Great Britain lines. None of those lines can lead back to Britain, so there's theoretically no stuff on them. That's a different one. That's a FEC line, and that one over there is an Anzac line. Oh, so we're just talking about the British convoy lines there and in the Med and, you know, in the Atlantic. So those ones there you wouldn't be able to convoy. Okay, we're just about done now. There's just a couple of things we need to go over. Really important things, actually. So I want to talk first about the nature of the relationship with these countries down here. The nature specifically within the Commonwealth. So the FEC here does not have a home country. It is strictly a colony of Great Britain. Even though it has a capital, even though it has its own income, it is just a colony. So you can't put any more than a minor factory on there. One thing that you can do, actually we'll get to that in a second. I'll show you about their special units. But yeah, it is just a colony, so that's all you can do. They're depending on Great Britain for everything. Because you can't build the major factory there, you obviously can't build a major shipyard, so you'll never be able to build like a capital ship there. I was trying, sorry, my tongue was tied. I'm looking straight at the battleship. So battleships or carriers, you're never going to be able to build a battleship or a carrier here because you could never build a major factory there. Now I play with a house rule that you could put a medium factory there, but that's not part of the rules. So I'm stressing that right now. You would have to build more than one factory here probably, and then you would probably have to build improved factories in order for you to even survive there as the FEC. It's a shame, but those are the rules. But Anzac is different. Anzac is its own home country. So this is Anzac here, these territories here, the Sydney's here, and also New Zealand. Those are part of the Anzac home country. And Sydney is the capital, even though Sydney's not the capital of Australia. It's just another city there. But they've made it the capital. They're not the only game to do that, but it's kind of funny how they do that. So you could put a medium factory here. You could put a major factory here. You could put a major shipyard here. You could put battleships and carriers here if you wanted to. So that's the difference. But again, these guys don't have the ability to declare war on anybody. Neither does the FEC. That solely comes from Great Britain. So let's talk about the one unit. Actually, there's a couple. The two units that you get here. The first one is colonial infantry. So what colonial infantry is, you can put them anywhere where there's dollar value and you own that territory, like this one here, Rhodesia, if it has a dollar value, right? So this one here has a dollar value of 1. If we could find something with a dollar value of 2, I'm just looking around here. I don't see one. Huh. What about Calcutta? Okay, Calcutta has a dollar value of 3 there. Now, because this is a colony up here, you can actually place colonial infantry in it. And so Calcutta has a dollar value of 3. So you could actually place the maximum, which is 2 per turn, 2 colonial infantry there if you wanted to. And that doesn't go against the factory. So the factory could also place whatever it wanted, right? Except for a capital ship, obviously. And like you could place, and well, you'd have to build a shipyard to build any kind of a ship there. But you could place a tank there or whatever you wanted, right? You wouldn't be able to place technology units there because this is not a home country. But again, you could place technology units here because this is a home country. Like if you develop super subs, you can absolutely place the super subs here, but you couldn't place them in FEC. So, you know, it's really quite complicated, right? But now you would not be able to place these guys here, even though there's a dollar value here. You couldn't place a colonial infantry there because that's home country. You wouldn't be able to place them up in Great Britain as well, but you could place them up here. This is not part of the home country, and this has got a dollar value. So basically, that's about the only place you could place him as the Anzac, unless you were to take over a territory from somebody, like this one here. You know, like if you took that territory, then I suppose you could put colonial infantry there. So there is one more unit, and that is the Gurkhas. Now this is strictly for the FEC. First of all, Nepal either has to be neutral. This is Nepal right here, this little strip of land here. That's Nepal. That has to be either neutral or in possession of the Allies. And if that's the case, then you can buy these guys, and they cost the same as the colonial infantry, so they cost 4. They can be placed anywhere without using a factory as well, right? And they cost 4. They're actually mountain infantry, so they're even better than colonial infantry. They also have a +1 defense in the jungle. So there's some jungle territories in here, and those are ones that you're going to want to defend, right? If the Japanese make it through the Chinese there, the next thing they're going to want to do is march up this way. So piling a bunch of Gurkhas in there is going to help out. You're going to get +1 defense for them, so they'll be at 5. Plus, they are mountain infantry as well. So in a mountain, they would also be defending at a 5. But that's the only specialty unit that you have that is unique to the Commonwealth. We'll just come back and I'll give my final thoughts. Okay, so final thoughts, a little bit about strategy. This is the most difficult nation to play. There's just no question about it. You're really the only ally on the board that is of any consequence until later in the game, like the last 1/3 of the game, right? France is in it, and they're a major power, but as you know, like France bows out pretty early in World War II, right? So they're not much help to you. And so it's the Commonwealth really against the world. Not only do you have to fight against the Germans and the Japanese and the Italians on all different fronts, but the Russian players probably being a dick to you too, right? You know, and you've got a lot of places to defend. You got a lot of different things that you have to defend. There's the war in the Atlantic. It's a complicated thing to do, this war in the Atlantic, if you've got a good German player. Hunting those subs down is like a game in itself. It's a difficult thing to do. One good thing is that at least the Royal Navy is actually portrayed pretty well in this game. Like you play Global 40 and you know, like it's a mistake if the German player can't take out the Royal Navy before the British even get a turn. I mean, that's just, it's just not based in reality at all. Whereas here, you're not even at war yet. Like, I doubt if they could take you out on the first turn anyway. In fact, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say they can't. And, you know, but even then, you've got time to reorganize it and to build it up and everything before the war even begins. So you are going to have a Navy throughout this game. But it's just that there's so much you got to do. Like, you've got you're involved in the war in Europe here. You're totally the one that's getting convoyed in the Battle of the Atlantic. Like, most of the convoying, 90% of the convoying in this game is going to be against the Commonwealth. If not more than that, it could be 95%, right? Because convoying, you know, like, it just doesn't happen much to the Japanese in here, you know, or inside the Baltic Sea against the Germans, right? Russia, they don't have a convoy line that's worth any money, right? So most of the convoying is going to happen to the Commonwealth, and that's something that you're going to have to deal with. You've got the fight over the Mediterranean with the Italians, and the Italians have a strong navy in here. Like, it doesn't look that bad right now, but they've also got ships that are over here that are going to come onto the board, right? And so all of a sudden it does get very big. Like, they've even got a battleship already started over there, and you know, like, they'll have all of that done by the time the game begins, right? So there's the Mediterranean. Then there's the fight over Africa. You're going to have to fight with at least the Italians and perhaps the Germans over Africa. And then, of course, you got the South Pacific over here. You've got the Japanese that you're fighting with 2 different nations that you're running. And then, you know, like, then you got the Russian player being a dick, you know, taking out your bonus in Iran, you know, what a dick. So there's so much for you to do that I don't recommend that the newest guy gets to play the Commonwealth. You know, like, it's a hard thing to do. And if there's 2 people doing it, even then it's still pretty difficult, because it's tough to get some cohesion going. You are supposed to be playing as one nation, so you don't need 2 people arguing over what to do. You know, it works better if it's just one person doing it. But you do have to have some skill to do it, because just like in the war, it was Britain against the Axis for a few years there, really. It was just Britain and her allies against the Axis after France fell. And it was a tough job. Like, you have to admire what they did. But for the purposes of this game, yeah, good luck to you. And it's fun, though. Don't get me wrong. I love playing the UK in this game, because you're busy. You're right in the thick of it, all over the board. and you're consumed by it. And so it's pretty exciting to play them. It's just, you know, hopefully you've got some skill before you take that task on, because you are going to need it. The Allies are going to depend, their success is going to depend on how well you do. So that is the Commonwealth. Take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.